People, you know, I get the question a lot. What is wrong with the Florida Democratic Party? I get that question here. I get that question wherever I travel when people find out that I've been involved with the Democratic Party. The great business guru of the 70s and 80s was a guy named Edward Deming. Deming's great insight was that it's the processes, the structure, that makes a business successful. You can flog the people as much as you want, you can pay them more, you can pay them less, but if the structure of the process is bad, the result is going to be bad. The Florida Party, the great English historian Maitland said that the forms may be dead, but they rule us from the grave. The forms of the Florida Party are dead, but they rule us from the grave. The Florida Party was a Dixiecrat party. Now, what's a Dixiecrat party? You haven't heard that term for a while. Think back to 1948. We all remember 1948. Strom Thurmond ran for president. Pardon?
I've been told you have to fix your collar.
Oh, thank you. Strom Thurmond ran for president against Harry Truman because Harry Truman was for civil rights, and the Democratic Party platform was for civil rights. And the Dixiecrats, the segregationists, were against that. The rules of the Florida Party from the Dixiecrat era still rule us today. And that is at the heart of our problem. There's a book by V.O. Key about Florida, about Southern politics. Because as you recall, back in 1949, when he wrote the book, the South was different from the rest of the country. It was a one-party environment, the Democratic Party only. And the Democratic Party existed not to run candidates, because whoever won the primary was going to win the election. As Key puts it, the Democratic Party existed to deal with post office patronage when we had the White House, to make sure that the two-thirds rule that assured the Southern delegates a veto over all nominees, and to make sure there was always a segregationist on the ticket. And if you look at the Democratic record from Thomas Jefferson down to 1968, there was always a slave owner or a segregationist on the Democratic ticket. Now, Roosevelt started liberating the party from that burden at the 36th convention when he did away with the two-thirds rule. And doing away with the two-thirds rule opened the door. The two-thirds rule at one time, the party went 102 ballots before we selected a candidate who was so weak that he was crushed by Calvin Coolidge. So that is the underlying structure of the Democratic Party. The heart of the party is the rule that the party cannot be involved in the selection of candidates. Any party that is not involved in the selection of its candidates is nothing more than a cheer squad. It's not a political party. It just cheers for whoever the leading powers put in as the nominee. The workers of the party have nothing to do with it. We're proposing a revolution, and the slogan for the revolution is all power to the workers. The people who do the work in the party should have a voice in the party. We shouldn't be excluded from selecting our nominees. We shouldn't be excluded from telling our neighbors, based on our experience, who the best nominee, who the best elected official would be. What are we going to do to change that? On your seats, or the seat next to you, is an outline of the three things that we're putting forward first. Your executive committee has endorsed these proposals, And at the end of the presentation tonight, we're going to discuss what we're going to vote on, urging the other clubs and and the county party and the rest of the state to adopt our proposals. There are basically three proposals. Is this a complete and total change? No, but it's a very important first step. The first step is to return control of nominations to the people. Right now, to run for office in Florida, all you have to do is fill out a couple of pieces of paper and sign a check. It's money that gets you on the ballot. Now, you can also go by petition, and we've encouraged candidates to go by petition. But still, if the last morning of qualifying, a billionaire wakes up and decides that he looks like a senator or a governor, he is able to write a check, fill out some paperwork, and get on the ballot. That is wrong. So the first proposal is to require a demonstration of community support before you get on the ballot. There are two ways to demonstrate community support. One is the existing method, which is by petition. Another method used in many states is that the local party committee can put someone on the ballot for the primary. The nomination is, of course, determined ultimately by the rank and file Democrats voting in a primary. But to get on the ballot, you should show community support either by gathering petitions or by getting support of your local party committee. If we do that, we will draw more people into the party. Because right now, you say to somebody, we'd like you to work your precinct. And they'll say, why? Oh, you're going to help elect Democrats. But why? Do I have any say? No, you just support who we tell you and work your little hearts out, cheer good and loud for the team, and then you get rewarded by a seat on the county executive committee where you can do more cheering and vote on some resolutions. That is not the way to build a party. To build a party, you have to empower the workers so that they have some skin in the game. If you want to get minority and other disadvantaged communities involved in the party, people whose lives are filled with the needs they need to survive, unless there's something more than a pat on the back, they're not going to join us. And we're going to continue to be alienated and distanced from those communities. But if the locally elected representatives of those communities have the power to put people on the ballot, if the state committee has the power to put people on the ballot, you will draw an entirely new group of highly motivated, highly competent people to serve on those bodies, to do the work, because they are now invested in candidates in which they believe, who they've put there, and who they owe an obligation. So the first thing is to return the nominating process, access to the ballot, to the hands of the people. That's step number one. Step number two. Back in the late 60s and early 70s, I was part of an initiative that changed the rules to require 50% representation of women at all levels of the party. It was a very good idea. It worked out extremely well. We now have many women in many important positions: state chairs, county chairs, zone leaders, club presidents. This is true all over the country because of the changes that the McGovern-Siegel Commission made in the fundamental party rules. In fact, half the delegates to the National Convention have to be women. It worked. But now, of course, as with everything that works, a problem has emerged. These rules now serve as a cap on the number of women who can participate. In each precinct, you have to have a man and a woman elected. If you have 4 women who work, only one of them can serve on the executive committee. That's bad. As far back as 2004, in the delegate election for this congressional district, the man, he was my son, so I'm partial, the man who finished 7th in the overall voting went to the convention as a delegate. The woman who finished 6th was the alternate. If she was the alternate because the rules required a woman to be the alternate. If the rules have required a man to be the alternate, then the person who finished 10th in the balloting would have gone to Boston, and the person who finished 6th, the person who finished 8th, or 7th rather, the person who finished 9th would have all stayed home, and the number 8 contender and the number 10 contender would have gone to Boston. This is true with delegations to the state convention. It's certainly true with positions on the county committee. So the next suggestion is to eliminate the ceiling on women's power by letting women take as many seats as they can win. It's no longer a suppressed class. Equality has arrived, and indeed, in terms of who does the work and who has the spirit, women are the backbone of this party. They're a majority of the voters in the country, and they're a huge majority of Democrats. So the second thing is to unleash women's power. The third one is a little bit more arcane, and it requires a little bit of background. So I'll indulge myself by telling you the background. Back in the segregation era, even as we were coming out of segregation, the party, as it was ruled then, wanted to suppress the participation of minorities. What's the best way to suppress the participation of minorities? Have at-large elections. In fact, the federal courts have ruled that if a town wants to go from a district system to an at-large system, they can't do it, because the effect is to eliminate minority participation in the city council. So, the state committee consists of 2 people, a man and a woman, from each county. There are also, and this is another problem, a lot of automatic and appointed members. But getting back to the elected members, you now have a system because of the weighted vote. The weighted vote means that each member of the state committee casts a vote based on the number of Democratic votes and the number of enrolled voters in their county. The result is that our state committee people have 46 votes each. In Broward, they have 51 votes each. In Miami-Dade, they have 51 votes each. The result is that 8 or 9 or 10 of the over 300 members of the state committee, just by sitting together, have a majority of the state committee. You can imagine that this creates a little dissatisfaction. It's also not exactly democratic. Furthermore, no one likes to sit in a meeting where you have 1 vote and the person sitting next to you has 40, 50 votes, or 30 votes, or 20 votes. It just isn't right. So, we propose a new way to constitute the state committee. Number 1, it consists only of elected people. There are no automatics. There are no appointeds. It's just elected people. Second, rather than making the selection by county, we propose to make the election by state house district or part thereof, because some state house districts cover more than one county. So if the state house district is in 2 counties or 3 counties, each county would elect its own representatives. The current proposal is to elect 1 person from each district. If people want to preserve the 50-50 balance and elect a man and a woman, there are many respectable states that do that. But the important thing is to have them selected by House district and to have them elected in the primary rather than by the county executive committee. What are the advantages of that? Number 1, if you hold the election on the same day as the presidential primary, you'll get people on the state committee who are committed to the current flavors leading the party. Second, if people have to run in a primary to get their state committee seat, they will build an organization to win. Once you build an organization to win, then you can take that organization and start to win general elections, because you have people who have gone through it, who have run a campaign, who know their neighbors, who know what they're doing. That's a tremendous advantage. The third possible advantage from this relates to the National Convention. Right now, Florida is one of the few states where the state committee does not select the at-large delegates and the members of the National Convention committees, the Rules Committee, the Platform Committee. These are important bodies where important things take place. They're selected, in essence, in Florida, and I know because I've been subjected to it, by the presidential candidates themselves. That's wrong. The state party should be selecting the people who represent it on the committees and as the at-large delegates for the National Convention. If we purged the state committee of all the automatics and appointeds, that body remaining of solely elected members would be qualified to elect the National Convention delegates. Now, how would these state committee members vote? The weighted vote is a constitutional necessity. People who represent 50,000 Democrats should not have the same throw weight as someone who represents 5,000 Democrats. We had that, as some may recall, in the city of New York. The Board of Estimate, which was sort of the upper house of the New York City legislature, had 1 member from Staten Island and 1 member from Brooklyn. You don't have to be from the city to know that Staten Island and Brooklyn have grossly different populations. But yet, they had the same vote on the Board of Estimate. This fell when 1 person, 1 vote finally reached the city. So the weighted vote, since all the districts are equal in population, but they're not equal in democracy, the weighted vote is a way to reflect the differing numbers of Democrats in each county now, hopefully House district in the future. So there will still be some disparities. Some people will have 5 or 6 votes. Some people will have 1 vote. The proposal I'm making is that you get 1 vote for every 10,000 votes cast for governor, divided by 10. So if you got, and round it up. So if you got 12,000 votes for Charlie Crist in your state house district, you would get 2 votes at the state committee. Or if there were 2 people, they would get 1 vote each. The disparity then, rather than being 40 or 50 or almost 60 to 1, is probably no more than 4. Perhaps in one case there'll be a 5, maybe even a 6. We should do so well in the governor's race that we get a couple of 6s. But the point is that you no longer have a half dozen people who cast the majority of the votes on the state committee. That's just not wrong. it's intolerable to the people who sit there. Now, will the big counties potentially still have the biggest throw weight? Sure. But it's different when you have 6 or 12 people casting their votes rather than 1 or 2. And hopefully, the county will develop a process where people consult together. And if they happen to come to the same conclusion, I hope, it'll be terrific. But the point is, it's no longer one person casting 56 votes, or 59 votes, or 40 votes. It's one person casting a handful of votes. And I believe that that not just preserves the constitutional requirements, but it evens it out, it brings more people in, and of course, because they've been running campaigns, we now have people who know how to campaign, because they've actually gone out and touched voters in order to hold their county committee seat. They don't have to just talk to a couple of hundred Democrats. They have to talk to a couple of thousand Democrats. They have to get their friends and neighbors to help them, and that's how you build an election organization. So, the final reform is the one that's on the agenda first, because the state committee is now in the process of dealing with the weighted vote. The solution so far, I must say, I feel are very foolish. One, they get rid of the weighted vote and every county casts the same vote. That is flat out unconstitutional. The other way is to have the executive committee elect 18 people, because that's what's necessary for Palm Beach to be fairly represented. That becomes almost an impossible task. But most important, if we want to build a party that is meaningful, we have to empower people. You empower people by giving them a voice in the access to the ballot. That's the key proposal. That's why it's first. Because the culture of Florida is everything revolves around what I call the lobbyist consultant axis. You want to run, you want to hire somebody, the first thing they ask you is how much money can you raise? That should not be the first question. The first question should be, what do you stand for? What are you going to vote for? Now, to be perfectly honest, the lobbyists and the consultants will ask that question too. But they're expecting, I suspect, what we would consider the wrong answer. The right answer is the answer that appeals to the voters when you're standing at their door asking for their signature to get on the ballot. So that change alone would change the entire political culture of Florida. In V.O. Key's book on Southern politics, the chapter on Florida is called Every Man for Himself. This disorganization and internal fighting made Florida the worst of all of the Dixiecrat states, because in some of the other states there was a semblance of organization. Down here, nothing but chaos. A group called the Pork Chop Gang, based in the Panhandle, ran the legislature for decades. In fact, the reason the Republicans control the legislature today is that during the 1992 reapportionment, the Pork Chop Gang refused to give any recognition to the state's black population by drawing districts that united them rather than cutting them apart so that white candidates could continue to get the nomination. The Republicans went to the black members and they said, hey, vote with us on a reapportionment map. We'll give you representation. And they did. They also gave themselves control of the legislature from 1992 down to today. Now, the party has left behind those racist roots. We are now one of the most forward-looking parties in terms of policy in the country. But the deep structures that were the basis of the Dixiecrat Florida Party still rule us. The same shibboleths that we have to stand on the sideline until the nominees are handed to us, and then we gotta cheer our asses off and do all the work, having had no participation in the selection of the candidates. Not only is that wrong, it clearly doesn't work. So, if we empower the precinct people to put people on the ballot, if we empower the state committee to put people on the ballot, all for a primary, always with the open door of petitions, but if we do that, then the party will be more than a cheer squad. It'll be the engine of progress. It'll move the state forward. It'll give us candidates who have won and therefore will win. The proposal tonight is that this club follow the lead of its executive committee and endorse these proposals. Last night, I presented this material to the club presidents. Our leadership, once we've endorsed these proposals, as I hope we will go and proselytize with the clubs and the caucuses in the county to get them on board with these three proposals. That will mean that hopefully the county executive committee will get on board with these proposals. Palm Beach has a long history of leadership. We have set the tone. As our tone has faded, the rest of the state has collapsed. We need to lead the structural changes that will turn the Democratic Party into something more than a cheer squad. We will make the changes that will turn the Democratic Party into a political party that has a voice in selecting its nominees. If we want to reach out to minority communities, the best way to do that is to give them power. We don't have patronage anymore, but we do have power. And if you say to the person who's working 2 jobs and trying to get their kids through school, if you join the executive committee, you will have a say in who the elected officials are. That will bring them, I believe, that will bring them in. I've seen it work in Harlem, when the reform movement reached out to Harlem and said, you tell us who your leaders are, and we're gonna back them. And as a result, Harlem became a stronghold of reform. We were able to change the way the judges were selected. We were able to change the nature of the legislature itself because we empowered people. If we want to turn the vote out in the communities of color, in the other underserved communities, we need to empower them, not to pander to them by going to a block party with a nice booth. Even if we show up at a block party every month, it's not the same as putting power in the hands of people. So, these are our proposals. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm happy to hear declarations of support. And the motion before the body, as put forward by the executive committee, is that we embrace these proposals and we promulgate them and promote them to the other clubs and to the county executive committee and lead the state once again to a better, stronger future.